We are welcoming now Claudia. Claudia, it's a pleasure to have you here. Claudia is a leading professional in the space. Claudia brings great experience in terms of financial issues and venture capital. Claudia Della Mora, welcome. Claudia.
Thank you, Carol. Hello, everybody.
Hello, Claudia. Claudia Della Mora is an investment banking professional with financial advisory and M&A experience, primarily in oil and gas, mining, gaming, and loading, consumer products, tech, and now cannabis, with transactions ranging in size from 10 million to 6 billion. We welcome Claudia. It's a pleasure to have you here. Claudia is going to give us an update regarding Mexico legalization. Why is Mexico important, Claudia?
Great. Thank you so much, Carol. It's always a pleasure working with you. When should I share my screen? Should I share it now? Okay. All right. So as Carol said, so my name is Claudia Della Mora. We're missing the part of my last name. So I'm an investment banking advisor. I run Black Legend Capital, which is a boutique advisory group based in Los Angeles. We have offices worldwide. We were born actually to advise and consult the oil and gas and energy sector, hence the name of the company. I come from Merrill Lynch, and so also my colleagues, my partners, the transaction that you just named obviously have been in our, in our work life. We do cover other industries, and this is also the reason why we were being able to dive into the cannabis space and help cannabis companies grow internationally because of our international network of companies and investors in different sectors. So this is just a little bit of information about us. We dived into cannabis since 2015. We've been covering literally almost every vertical of the cannabis space, from cultivation to pharma companies, North America, US, Canada, Europe, and also South America and Colombia. As a matter of fact, we've looked at some interesting deals together in Colombia as well. Now, in the past couple of years, we dived into the international legalization space in order to help better, our client companies, but also in order to, really understand where this new industry is going, right? And as we know, it has gone through huge changes just in the last few years due to legalization, obviously. Now, this is just a little snapshot of what's going on at the moment. There's many research, obviously, sources and projections. We believe that cannabis, the global cannabis industry by 2026 will be 90 billion. Currently is around 20 billion. If you consider that the US Americans, consumers almost purchased, 90% of this 20 billion, almost $18 billion in 2020. Now we see a projection of about 23 billion for US consumptions in 2024, which is about half of the global market value of cannabis in 2024, around 50-55 million. Now this number will double with the entrance of Mexico. Projections are above 100 billion in 2024 with Mexico included. So just to give a little perspective, so then we all know projections change, right? Now, why Mexico? So as I said, I've dived into many other countries, legalization. I'm Italian, regional European, so I love what's going on there. I'm following, daily. But the situation in Mexico is very particular, and I believe it really deserves to have a little bit of more attention. We're talking about a population of 130 million. We're talking about 10 million regular cannabis users already in Mexico, plus tourists from all over the world. Mexico will generate 1.2 billion in annual tax revenues from this legalization, while saving $200 million in law enforcement costs, meaning policing against, of course, the illegal trafficking, the cartel, and obviously creating thousands of jobs. We also believe that cannabis legalization will bring to the economy in Mexico up to $5 billion annually. Now, why Mexico is so important, or considered almost like an opportunity or a threat to North America? Cheap labor, great climate, even better than ours, would be able to produce cannabis more efficiently than most other countries. A little bit of the same situation we have with Colombia, right? But with the difference that Mexico is a huge country and is a neighboring country to United States. Now, what is USMCA? USMCA was actually is replacing NAFTA. We know NAFTA was created to favor and promote trade and business relationships between Mexico, United States, and Canada. USMCA was started and implemented under Trump, and with the purpose of protecting U.S. labor, therefore enhancing or improving or demanding better wages for the Mexican work labor in Mexico. Now, let's look at the history a little bit. So, first of all, cannabis and marijuana have been present in Central America and in Mexico for centuries, since the time of the Spaniards. And at the time, it was used mostly for really livelihood reasons. Hemp was a source of fibers for textile, for food, and it became part of the culture. Then subsidies ceased in the 1800s. So when Mexico gained independence, from Spain, so production fell a little bit. Continuing in the new century, cannabis kept being used recreationally, also for religious reasons, and also medicinal. It's always been considered a medicinal plant up to the prohibition. Prohibition started around the 1920s for different reasons, kind of a stigma. Now, it's also important to understand around, in the last century, what really happened. What regulates cannabis and marijuana in general in the world is not federal legalization in some particular country, but it's actually the United Nations. And few people talk about it. There's the 3 United Nations conventions on narcotic drugs, and specifically the single convention on drugs, 1961, which was actually signed by both United States and Mexico. And that was, 1961, followed by the war on drugs with President Richard Nixon in 1971. Okay. Now, after that, cannabis became, illegal. So what happened was the advent of the cartel, meaning the illegal trafficking of this plant that everybody still wanted to use and commercialize and sell and buy, right? So we've gone a long way. The cartel in Mexico has actually their main business was trafficking, cannabis. So we believe actually that one of the reasons why the government in Mexico wants to legalize federally this plant is also to curb the illegal trafficking, on top of course, helping the economy. Now, let's look a little bit at what happened in the past few years. So finally, we have a change in the past, less than 10 years. In 2015, Mexico decriminalizes cannabis use in general, just like many other countries in Europe. Italy decriminalized cannabis use in 2013, and nobody even knows. In 2017, finally, Mexico legalizes medical cannabis, for medical uses, without issuing any rules. And that was for anything below 1% THC. So the threshold in Mexico is different from United States, which is 0.3%. In certain European countries, it's 0.2%. Now in Mexico is 1% THC. What happened in 2018 then was very interesting, because the Supreme Court deemed unconstitutional the prohibition, basically what had been going on since the war on drugs and in the past 30 years. So the Supreme Court basically urged Congress to legalize or issue regulations and do something about it, and gave Congress a deadline of 2020, which obviously was missed. But what happened was that finally still in 2018 is important to say, in a rush, the Congress issued 21 licenses, okay, for CBD, obviously, I mean, anything below 1% THC. So several companies got these licenses, and some of them are currently operating. You will see CBD products on retail stores in Mexico currently, but it is a gray area because right after they issued these licenses, they tried to revoke them. So some of them got revoked, some didn't. The guideline in general got revoked. So it's been a gray area for the past 3 years, really waiting for these new regulations. So finally, in December 2020, the Senate passed the bill, so a few months ago. March 2021, which is a few months ago, the Chamber of Deputies signed the bill and sent it back to the Senate with amendments to be accepted, reviewed, and then signed again, and a deadline of April 30th, 2021. So it was this April 30th deadline, which obviously was missed, also because they wanted to wait for the midterms elections June 6th last month, which actually went very well. And again, during the midterms elections, we understood the positive stance of Congress and the president of Mexico in terms of legalizing. They just want to do it in the right way. So next step would be the Senate to accept the amendments, sign the bill. After that, the president will sign the bill. After that, the new rules will be published on the Gazette. And then, we assume, we hope that all of this will happen within this year, 2021. Then, of course, there will be a few months of, without regulations when certain government bodies will be put together. Mostly it's the Cannabis Institute. So the Mexican Cannabis Institute will be a government agency created to issue this licenses, okay, which are 4 licenses. I'm going to go into that in a second. Now, I want to make it clear that what we're talking about here, the new federal law on the regulation of cannabis, only regulates recreational marijuana and industrial hemp. It does not regulate medicinal. Medicinal was already legalized in 2017. And finally, by the way, the rules for medicinal marijuana were issued and published in January 2021. So the medicinal side is already under regulations, okay? We're only talking about recreational marijuana and industrial hemp, which is very important because most people don't talk about industrial hemp. Industrial hemp has been a part of our economy for centuries. And at the moment, Mexico cannot cultivate hemp or export hemp, even for industrial use. That's because the two plants are very easily, misunderstood, right? I mean, you can confuse the two plants very well. So in a lack of regulations, the government decided to not even allow industrial hemp. So finally, that can be, taken care of and produced. So now let's look at this federal legalization in Mexico. Okay, as I said, the new federal law on the regulation on cannabis, that's the name, will regulate recreational and industrial hemp. This Mexican Institute of Cannabis will be created. Now, about the licenses, we're talking about 4 types of licenses: cultivation, transformation, which is anything from extraction and manufacturing; sale, which is anything from distribution, retail, marketing; import, export is what it is. There will also be some subcategories for cultivation for different reasons, as you can see: personal, scientific, therapeutic, recreational, pharmaceutical, industrial. Now, the purpose again of this legalization is to curb, as we said, the illegal market. Okay, so anyone with criminal background is not supposed to get a license. Of course, it's going to be difficult to filter everybody who's related to the cartel, but this is the same rule we see in Canada. Also, major corporations will not have priority over licensing. So the purpose would be to favor the people in Mexico who got hurt by the prohibition. and only allow a small percentage of licenses to foreign corporations. Of course, we will see all kinds of JVs and partnerships, right, that would be done. Now, something important I wanted to say is that this the creation of these new rules and legalization has gone through a lot of changes. Last year, they did not want to provide vertical integration, meaning every entity or person who was applying for licenses could only get one type of license, not all four types. That would prevent, vertical integration. That's because of fear of, again, of the cartel having control of the entire business, right? Now this has changed. So I know that currently, entities can actually apply for different licenses and be vertically integrated. Another issue in Mexico will be the transferability of the licenses. This is the law in Mexico. You can't really transfer licenses, so that would hinder merger and acquisitions opportunities. But of course, as the business develops, we will have some solutions about that as well. Now, I wanted to talk about the relationship, the trade relationships with North America, right? What are the consequences of Mexico legalization? So we all know what NAFTA is. NAFTA got created, in order to improve the trade and business relationships between Mexico, Canada, and the United States. It got replaced by USMCA in 2020. USMCA actually was put in place on purpose to protect U.S. workers and therefore impose or request higher wages for Mexican workers. Also, for example, here there's just a simple examples on the automobile industries. The USMCA is requiring a certain percentage of parts to be made in North America, another percentage to be made by workers making at least $16 an hour. So basically, the USMCA was put in place to kind of, really protect the U.S. or Canadian workers versus cheap labor, in Mexico. Now, at the moment, USMCA does not include cannabis. Okay, it includes everything else: tomatoes, sugar, avocados, and we know what happened the past, several decades with that. If cannabis is added to the USMCA without any trade barriers, okay, or tariffs, Mexico can export to United States easily, much cheaper, and produce in a more efficient way. This is an example of the tomato and sugar war. So again, under NAFTA, and then ratified and improved with the USMCA, the relationships between the United States and Mexico, the tomatoes and the sugar, Mexico trying to sell a cheaper cost, of course, and hindering the economy in the United States. What we do with USMCA is we impose tariffs or trade barriers or minimum wages for Mexico's workers. So the same way we've been dealing with the tomato, with the sugar, with the avocado, we're going to, deal with cannabis just as another one of, the commodities exchanged. Now, I wanted to show the verticals that would be benefit or not, depending on, what happens once Mexico is federally legal and United States can actually import. Now, you can import immediately anything below 0.3% THC, but once we are also federally approved, that could be a problem. There's going to be pros and cons, right? So if there's not going to be, if USMCA does not impose any tariffs, any trade barriers, so open borders, we will have a problem with cultivation, probably even manufacturing in the United States. And so many companies are jumping in cultivation, especially in California. Mexico can produce much cheaper, and the sectors can be hurt very badly, right? On the other hand, if we impose trade barriers, then the sectors can benefit most by driving up prices of Mexican producers or banning any import into the U.S. altogether, which is going to be difficult. Retail and distribution. I think the retail distributions are going to be the golden verticals. They're going to kind of benefit regardless. The sectors, of course, retail and distribution will benefit from lower cost of goods sold if there's free trade, and might not benefit from, extremely low cost of goods sold if there's trade barriers. But the sector will continue flourishing, right, and developing. Testing labs. This is really depends if then regulations between Mexico and United States, where we decide that biomass of products need to be tested. Now, keep in mind that in the sugar, tomato, avocado business, there's they test in Mexico as well. So they will probably create testing labs in Mexico as well. So with free trade, we will see that testing labs will not benefit unless U.S. requires Mexican cannabis to be tested in the United States. And with trade barriers, instead, testing labs could benefit, obviously being protected. Now, extraction. Extraction, same thing, could be hurt as cost of labor is cheaper in Mexico, but not as much or as bad as cultivation. And, the opposite if there's trade barriers. Okay. All right. So now what does this mean for the public market and investors? So many investors worldwide, US, European, like to invest in publicly traded companies. And we've seen what happened with those publicly traded companies. But in general, the rules is this, right? The companies touching the flower, meaning touching or working with THC, cannot, in countries where it's not federally legal, like United States, cannot list on the big exchanges, but it cannot also list in the Toronto Stock Exchange, only in the Canadian Stock Exchange or the over-the-counter, right? At the same time, we see instead companies that are operating, touching the flower, THC, in countries where it's federally legal, such as Canada, being able to be publicly traded in the big exchanges and therefore receiving the big attentions from the big investors and big capital, right? And this has really happened after the 2018 Farm Bill, which gave green light for the industrial production of hemp and CBD, and therefore Canadian LPs were able to take advantage of this and establish a distribution network in United States land, more than some MSOs. This makes us believe that the same will happen in Mexico. Companies operating in Mexico in THC, when Mexico will be federally legal, will be able to list in the big exchanges in the United States and have access to the big capital. Now, at the moment, we know that this is just a thought that we've had, right? In order to list in the big exchanges, you need to meet certain exchange requirements. And at the moment, obviously, if you're touching the flower, the big exchanges in the US don't want to accept any of these companies for fear of, being punished by the federal government. Our little question would be, what if the Safe Banking Act happens? Now, the Safe Banking Act is for commercial banking access, okay? It's not for public companies to be listed in the big exchanges, but we're still talking about the federal government. So what is the Safe Banking Act? The Safe Banking Act finally passed the House in April 2021, and now is awaiting vote for this. It's in front of the Senate, and if the Senate passes it, then the president, U.S. president, will sign it, and finally, cannabis companies will have access to commercial, the big commercial banks, federal banks. I'm sure some people might not agree, but this is just a thought. If companies access federal banking institutions, maybe this could be a step forward towards U.S. companies that are touching the plant in the United States where it's not federally legal, to maybe be able to list in the big exchanges. Anyhow, obviously that would, whatever happens, the sources of capital is what is determining determining the ability of companies to grow, expand internationally, and increase their valuation. So this is one of the main problems in the industry, sources of capital. That's why you see some publicly traded companies, Canadian LPs, with huge balance sheets, with huge investors and huge valuations. Revenues are okay, nothing special, while the other companies without huge investors or huge, cash equivalents in the balance sheet don't have those valuations, right? So access to capital is definitely, one of the big problem in the industry. Thank you very much for giving this opportunity to share a little bit our knowledge on what is happening in Central America, Mexico, and North America.
Thank you, Claudia. If anyone would like to contact Claudia and her team at Black Legend Capital, please feel free to contact info@blacklegendcap.com.